This story begins with a man named Adrian, a successful businessman who meets with a woman named Virginia. Adrian is currently out on bail and under house arrest, having been charged with the murder of his girlfriend, Laura. He maintains his innocence. We learn that Virginia is a very famous defense attorney, sent by Adrian's regular lawyer to handle his case. Virginia gets right to business, telling Adrian that he will have to testify in court that very night because the prosecutor has found a new witness against him. She makes it clear that if he wants to win, he must tell her everything, the absolute truth, with no lies or omissions. Adrian thinks for a moment, then begins to tell his story, starting with the night Laura was murdered. He claims that he and Laura had already ended their affair, but they were blackmailed. An anonymous caller demanded they come to a remote hotel with 100,000 euros. They both went to the hotel room and waited for instructions. Soon, a message arrived, sent from Laura's own phone, meaning it had been hacked. Laura realized they were being trapped, and they quickly packed their belongings to leave. But just then, someone attacked Adrian from behind, and he was knocked unconscious. He says that when he regained consciousness a short time later, the police were knocking at the door. As Adrian got up to answer, his eyes fell on a decorative showpiece on a table, which was stained with blood. He then looked towards the bathroom, where he found Laura's body. He rushed to her side. She had a severe head injury and was lying on the floor, with the 100,000 euros scattered around her. As soon as Adrian lifted her body, the police burst into the room and arrested him. Virginia listens to his story, then immediately points out the flaws. The police had thoroughly checked the room. It was locked from the inside, and due to the cold weather, the windows had been sealed shut and could not be opened. The police found absolutely no signs of a forced entry or exit by a third person. She again tells Adrian to tell her the truth. When Adrian tries to deflect, Virginia sternly tells him that in the eyes of the law, he is the criminal. She warns him that there is no salvation without pain, and that he is not as smart as she is. She places a newspaper in front of him. The headline is a report about a young boy who went missing from a bridge in the mountains. Adrian looks visibly worried by this news. Virginia tells him that if he wants to avoid going to jail, he cannot lie to her again. The story now flashes back to the past. Adrian begins to tell a different story, one that started 3 months ago. He was cheating on his wife, Sonia, and had lied to her about being in Paris for the weekend. In reality, he and Laura had spent the weekend at a remote cabin. As they were driving back to Barcelona, Laura told him to drive faster as they were already running late. Adrian was feeling immense guilt over the affair, and while Laura tried to convince him that they were right for each other, Adrian insisted that they had to end things. While they were arguing, a deer ran out in front of their car. To avoid hitting it, Adrian swerved into the other lane and crashed into an oncoming car, which then collided with a tree. Adrian and Laura survived the crash. They both got out to check on the other car and found a young man on the driver's seat. His name was Daniel, and he had a very deep head injury. Adrian was about to call the police, but Laura stopped him. She pointed out that Daniel wasn't wearing his seatbelt and appeared to have been texting while driving. She argued that since no one had seen the accident, they should just leave. Adrian knew it was wrong, but he agreed. Just then, they heard another car approaching on the road. Thinking quickly, Laura told Adrian to support her story. She pushed Daniel's body down onto the passenger side floor. They then pretended that their two cars had simply collided with each other and that they were exchanging insurance information. As the other car passed, Laura even answered a ringing phone to make everything seem normal. After the other driver was gone, Laura got into Adrian's car to wait for a tow truck, since their car wouldn't start. Meanwhile, Adrian put Daniel's body into the trunk of Daniel's car and then pushed the car into a nearby lake. While Laura was waiting, a man named Thomas passed by. He said that his own car had broken down after a minor collision with a hedge. Thomas, a friendly man who talked about his family, offered to take Laura and her car to his home to fix it. On the way, Laura gave him a fake name and told him she was in town to visit her sister, claiming she owned a bookstore. Thomas mentioned that he loved books, especially classics, because he and his wife had met in a theater club. After reaching his house, Thomas introduced Laura to his wife, Elvira. While inside, Laura looked at photos of the couple from their theater days. It's here that she made a horrifying discovery. Thomas and Elvira were the parents of Daniel, the boy whose body she and Adrian had just disposed of in the lake. While Laura was in the kitchen, Elvira received a phone call and learned that Daniel had not yet arrived where he was expected. She tried calling her son's phone. Laura then realized that Daniel's phone was in her pocket. She quickly went into another room and hid the phone under a pillow, hoping everyone would think Daniel had simply forgotten it at home before he left. Laura then said she had to leave, and Thomas walked her outside. As Laura got into the driver's seat, Thomas noticed that she had to adjust the seat forward significantly before starting the car. This made Thomas suspicious, as it implied a much taller person had been driving the car before her. Laura picked Adrian up from the lake and told him everything that had happened. Adrian, having gotten rid of his car and reported it stolen to create an alibi, decided with Laura that they had to separate. They swore to never meet or speak to each other again. A few days later, the police unexpectedly arrived at Adrian's office and took him to the police station. They informed him about Thomas's report and about the woman he had helped whose car matched Adrian's. Adrian stuck to the story about his car being stolen. Later, he had his lawyer arrange a fake hotel reservation and a fake plane ticket for Paris to solidify his alibi. He asked for his case to be kept separate from the investigation into Daniel's disappearance. It was then reported that Daniel, where he worked, had run away after stealing money. Adrian confronted Laura about this, and she admitted that she had stolen Daniel's purse when they were putting his body in the car. She later hacked Daniel's bank account and made the money disappear to create a false narrative that he was a fugitive. Adrian told her what she did was wrong, but Laura threatened to trap him in the crime if he exposed her. Virginia expressed suspicion here, noting that Laura was a photographer. Hacking a bank account is not something she could likely do. Adrian suggested that maybe she got help from her husband, who was a banker. Continuing his story, Adrian told Virginia about the night he won the Businessman of the Year award. At the party, Thomas approached him, posing as a reporter, and tried to get him to confess the truth. Thomas also noted that Adrian had the same unique cigarette case he had seen in the car with Laura when he was helping her. He pleaded with Adrian to just tell him where his son was, but Adrian denied knowing anything. Security was called, and Thomas was thrown out. Adrian admitted that he was very scared that day. He said he had kept an eye on Thomas, who he saw take his sick wife home and then disappear. He claimed he never saw Thomas again. Virginia stated that now all the cards were on the table. There were two dead bodies, Laura and Daniel, and their deaths were directly connected. For the police, there was only one murder, Laura's, with Adrian as the main suspect. But for Daniel's parents, there were two victims, and they suspected both Adrian and Laura. She said to solve this puzzle, she needed to know exactly what happened in that hotel room. Adrian suggested that a person who might have seen Daniel's car being pushed into the lake was the other driver who was fooled by him and Laura. Virginia replied that a jury would only believe it if they had real evidence. Adrian then told her how he and Laura were blackmailed and called to the hotel. They received a picture of the lake where they had pushed the car and were ordered to bring the money. Adrian claimed the blackmailer must be that other driver. Virginia warned him that if he gives the jury an incomplete story that doesn't include Daniel's death, he will give the prosecution the exact opening they need. Virginia then said she would only move forward with the case if he could answer 3 questions. First, how did the blackmailer get the message on his phone? Second, if the motive was murder, why didn't the killer take the money? And third, how did the person who killed Laura enter and leave the locked room like a ghost? Adrian couldn't answer these questions. Based on the story she'd heard, Virginia began to guess what might have happened. She theorized that Thomas was already hidden in the hotel room before Adrian and Laura arrived. She believed that if they named Thomas as the killer, they could convince the jury. The jury would see that Thomas had a clear motive for murder, believing his son's killers were about to escape without punishment. Virginia said the only way to clear Adrian's name from Laura's murder was to pin it on Thomas. But for this to work, Adrian would have to confess to everything he and Laura did to Daniel. Adrian argued this wouldn't help if they couldn't solve the mystery of how the killer got in and out of the hotel room. Virginia then showed him photos and newspaper clippings, telling him to focus. In one picture from his arrest, she pointed out that Thomas's wife, Elvira, was present in the hotel lobby. She laid out a new theory. Thomas and his wife had trapped him and Laura. Since Thomas's wife worked at that hotel, she could have easily hidden Thomas in the room beforehand and helped him escape afterward. Because Adrian's lawyer had successfully removed Thomas as a person of interest, The police never investigated his wife. Just then, Virginia received a phone call. She told Adrian she had found out that the prosecutor's witness was the driver who saw them at the accident scene. Now acting fully as Adrian's lawyer, she suggested a new strategy. This was all Laura's doing. Adrian was actually in Paris the whole time and only got involved to cover up for Laura. She suggested he could plant some of his belongings in Daniel's car to fully frame Laura. Adrian pointed out that the prosecutor still had the driver as a witness. Virginia then admitted she had just lied to Adrian. The prosecutor had no witness. She asked him why he didn't tell her the full truth earlier. Adrian confessed that he was testing her to see if she could come up with a viable solution to frame Thomas. He then claimed that he did see Thomas that night and knew he was behind it all. As Virginia stood by the window, pointing to the location where he had drowned the car, Adrian said he had one more thing to tell her. He confessed that Daniel was still alive when he pushed the car into the lake. He was still breathing. He claimed it was Laura who took things too far and decided to sink the car, and that if an autopsy was ever done, it would show Daniel died of drowning. Adrian said he needed Virginia's help with this final detail. Virginia was disturbed. She told him her duty was to save him from jail, not from himself. She said it's possible that everything happened as he said, but it's also possible that it was Adrian who did everything, caused the accident, lied, and even stole the money. Virginia revealed that Laura's medical reports showed she suffered from severe anxiety. She proposed a final scenario. What if the guilt of what they did had consumed Laura? What if she was the one who called Thomas and confessed everything? She contacted Adrian to get him to the hotel with the money as compensation. But when he arrived, Adrian killed Laura to silence her and then concocted this elaborate story to save himself. When Adrian asked why the parents didn't come forward, Virginia explained that without a body, they couldn't prove anything, and they knew Adrian would never blame himself. Virginia then revealed that she had been harassed with a photo of Thomas's wife and pointed to the building opposite Adrian's apartment, where Thomas now lives and had been following him since Laura's death. Under this intense pressure, Adrian finally broke. He confessed that he killed Laura and made up the entire drama. At that moment, Adrian's lawyer called and left a voicemail, saying he couldn't reach Adrian and to call him back. Virginia told Adrian to take a 10-minute break to call his lawyer, Felix. She then left the apartment very quickly. Adrian turned his phone back on and called Felix, who told him that he had successfully paid the driver from the accident to remain silent. Suddenly, the call cut out. Adrian noticed that the pen Virginia had given him was leaking ink. When he checked it, he discovered it wasn't a pen but a hidden microphone. He remembered that Virginia had insisted he turn off his phone, claiming it was so there would be no signal interference with her own device, but it was really to ensure a clean recording. He looked across the street into the building opposite and saw Thomas standing next to Virginia. And then came the final, shocking revelation. Virginia took off her disguise. She was actually Elvira, Thomas's wife and Daniel's mother, in disguise the whole time. They now had his full, recorded confession and called the police. Just as they did, the Real Virginia Goodman was shown arriving at the front of Adrian's building. Adrian looked on in shock, completely trapped, knowing that he would now be punished for his crimes. And this is where the story ends. If you ever have an accident, don't worry, help that person. Your small act of help can save someone's life. Please share your comments about this story. See you in the next video. Until then, take care of yourself and your loved ones.